Okay, you've worked on both community and county councils. What are the differences and which do you find most rewarding?
Yeah, so I think we've covered this a little bit already,
Yeah,
but no question, county council is more rewarding for me. I think, as I mentioned before, you can genuinely make a difference at county council level. Look, the fact of the matter is that most decisions are made at this level of local government. Maybe on larger town councils with larger budgets, there are things which you can do at town and community level, such as local events, community projects, which you can look at, but they're usually limited to a relatively small amount of money which they can devote to it.
yeah,
You know, in comparison to the millions and millions of pounds which the county council are responsible for. So, yeah, no question, county level. Perhaps I'm a little bit disillusioned by my experience at town and community council level. So, I'm happy for people to, you know, provide,
challenge your
to
your
challenge that, to
yeah,
disagree with me on that if you wish to do so. But no, for me, I find it far more rewarding in actually being able to get results for people. As I mentioned, that is the most rewarding thing. So I think it's quite frustrating at town and community council level potentially that you don't have more powers. You know, it may be the case in some regards that it, some community projects should be devolved further down to the
yeah,
town and community level, but also the funding would have to go with that then as well.
yes, yeah, a lot, especially I think now with the sports field with the delayed increase again of the pitch fees and that, they're looking for more town community councils, clubs to take over these facilities. But
Yeah,
in the short term, with a small bit of funding, that's okay. But they've got to think about long term. How are they going to keep up with these costs? It's the same as Bridgend, but they've got tighter budgets on community councils to do that. Next, what is happening in Penprysg at the moment that's got you any concern or that's actually good for the area?
well, Penprysg is a relatively residential area, as you probably know. I suppose my area covers the northern third of Pencoed, and then also covers the rural area of Helakew and Rwcilog. So there are different challenges in different communities. There isn't anything, I suppose, specific coming up in the next year compared to other years. It's the same old issues which I've described already. But I have raised one issue in council recently regarding school capacity issues, which is causing some concern with my constituents here in Penprysg. And that is, first of all, I don't believe the Pencoed Primary School, which is actually one of the biggest primary schools in the borough, was built big enough. So that's going to cause an issue for potential school access in future. But another specific concern which I raised recently is school capacity issues for Welsh language medium education for people in Pencoed. So it means that somebody who wants to access Welsh medium education has to be either bused or taxied all the way across the county borough to Maesteg, or all the way across the county borough to North Connelly to access Welsh medium education. So what I've mentioned is that that needs to be addressed through the school catchment areas. Now, that is just one very specific point for Penprysg. But apart from that, it's the same old things. You know, there are a few planning issues which are causing concern within the area. But other than that, it's the general issues of, as I say, waste collection, potholes, social services and educational issues, which I mentioned earlier.
Um, Going on to planning, we've just had the consultation for the local development plan end in the last few days, and it won't be announced for at least another year, which is after the elections. Are there any concerns within that LDP that have been brought up to your attention in regards to Penprysg area?
Yes, and I suppose I'll answer this question in terms of Pencoed as a whole, if I may,
Yeah,
because after the next election, you'll be aware the Boundary Commission has suggested some changes. and Penprysg will cease to exist as a ward at next election. There'll be a 3-member ward for the whole of Pencoed. So I've submitted representations to the draft local development plan on the basis of it being the whole of Pencoed. There is one specific issue regarding Penprysg, and that's the new Penprysg road bridge. At the moment, there's a set of traffic lights in the centre of Pencoed, which is essentially a one-way road bridge which links the west and east of the town. And there are plans, then that goes over the railway, and there are plans to make that a dual bridge, and therefore it will lift the current planning moratorium on development in the west of the town. So that could be significant in that potentially developments could occur to the west of the town in the ward of Hendra and in the ward of Penprysg. So that's something to keep an eye on. Residents are probably wary of that, given the traffic access issues on Hendra Road and the lack of I suppose available land for development. However, the local authority have said that there isn't any prospect of development past this plan period, so that's after 2033. So I know that's a detailed response, so people might not be able to get their heads around it, but as far as I'm aware, the planning moratorium will still exist regardless of whether the new road bridge is improved. This will result in the closure of the level crossing in Pencoed. So the railway line runs through the very centre, the main line between Swansea and London, runs right through the centre of Pencoed. So this will mean the closure of the level crossing. So everyone would have to use the Penprysg road bridge then to access the west of Pencoed. Now, I welcome this to a certain extent because it opens up development opportunities for the very centre of Pencoed then. It creates a nice square, a centrepiece for Pencoed around the cenotaph, what's commonly known as the monument here. It would be good for the town centre. However, it's something that we need to watch, and the widening of Hendra Road to accommodate extra traffic is important. The other thing, I suppose, briefly, is the development, or the proposed development of 770 houses to the east of Pencoed. Now, Pencoed is considered as a place which could be an area of sustainable development, employment opportunities, somewhere which is accessible because it's close to the M4 and it links very well with Cardiff and Swansea. I recognise that. However, if you're going to build 770 houses to the east of Pencoed, Pencoed needs the facilities to be able to accommodate those additional houses. So those are the kinds of things which need to be addressed in the draft plan. In short, those are the issues which I've raised. So I'm hoping that the developers and the planners will take that into consideration by the time the LDP is finally published.
That's great. It sounds like there's a lot going on for the future, especially in the next 11 years with the LDP coming up. But that brings on an issue with regards to planning that I've seen with planning. It's the objection part of the planning where public object to something. As we've seen with the wellness centre in Bridgend and Tondy, they had record numbers of objections and they were totally ignored. What's the point of objecting, public objecting to something? In Tondy, they had 3 community councils, a Senedd member, county councillors objecting to it, but all totally ignored because it was in the LDP and it would be granted at appeal anyway. So what is the point of having somebody object when it doesn't make a blind bit of difference? It means nothing at all anyway.
Yeah, I sympathise with residents on this, to be honest with you. And I think that planning law needs to be reformed wholesale. Now, this wouldn't be a matter for, obviously, local government in isolation. It would have to be done by Welsh Government. Yeah. There's a massive amount of frustration, isn't there, about planning law. I suppose with regards to the wellness centre, I'm not totally familiar with the situation there, but with regards to any planning issue, My understanding is that objections need to be based on on what's called material planning considerations, and you can't just object just because you don't like something somewhere. It can't be sort of not in my backyard.
Yeah.
That's fine, but the chances are, if so many people objected, that they would have material planning considerations. So I do feel for residents' frustration. I do feel residents' frustrations there. Now,
I
in my view, I also don't believe people generally should be able to proceed with developments and then seek retrospective planning permission. This has always been a bugbear of mine. And people's objections then should be given far more weight. People start building. I got one in my ward now from which people have built something in the middle of nowhere, and it's been taken to the planning inspectorate because it didn't gain planning permission, and ultimately they can just put planning permission in retrospectively. Now this is farcical, isn't it? Because ultimately, if planning enforcement ultimately win the case at planning inspectorate level, then potentially these people could just leave the land and not restore it to its original state. Now this is really poor, isn't it, for local residents in the area who want their community to be preserved. But I sympathise therefore with BCBC and the planning officers who have to deal with this on a daily basis. Planning enforcement seem powerless in some respects to enforce breaches of planning conditions, and essentially people, I suppose, like me and others, and at cabinet level, need to lobby the local government minister to reform planning law wholesale, so that it addresses some of the issues which you raised.
Yeah, I think I do sympathise with planning officers and that, because essentially they have to follow the law, not feelings, unfortunately. But then it does go to a vote of the planning committee of whether it gets approved or not. Am I correct in that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's like I remember, Tom D, because I was part of the objections at the time, and the council officers at the time, the head of the planning, in the meeting said clearly, under the law we have to. There is no reason why this can't go through. But if you do object to it, I can't be part of the process further on the line. Now, my understanding is he works for the council, regardless of whether he likes what they do or agrees or disagrees. He still works for council, and if council reject it, he should be working on their behalf to find the reasons why this shouldn't go ahead, or to say, well, this had so much public objection. In the wellness village, they have public objection with the traffic situation, which Park Street has already got a traffic order on it with the pollution. So a wellness centre with more visitors is going to create more traffic. So I can see that there are reasons for objection. I don't agree with not in my backyard. I don't agree with that. But I do agree if there are practical reasons, like the air pollution on Park Street, which is going to feed into the wellness village, like the woods at Tom D, where there are rare species that live there, but they couldn't find any because they went out of the season of when the rare species would be there. Then I do think the objections are there for council employees to say, this is the reason why people objected. This is overwhelmingly, people don't want this. Regardless, the majority of people in the area don't want this. It's not a case of not in my backyard. They've been burnt by other developments, which was part of the reason Tom D, because they had the retail park. They were promised a medical centre and ended up getting a retail park, and they didn't want that happening again. So that was part of the reason for objecting. But I just think council employees work for council. They should do as they're directed, as long as it's not breaking the law in any way. That they should take the respect of the councillors, because they're the ones elected in positions to make those decisions, regardless of whether they disagree or agree. Sorry, that's my little rant
Yeah,
about
no,
planning.
I think you're absolutely right. But you know, we do have the opportunity to send issues such as this to committee. We do have the opportunity. I don't sit on planning committee any longer, but for example, on a number of occasions where there have been objections to planning developments in my particular ward, you can request an opportunity to speak. You know, it is a big deal if the planning committee go against officers' recommendations. It's rare. They can do, you know, so I suppose it's up to members of planning. But the you make a good point. In the planning law at the moment is heavily weighted in favour of the applicant rather than the objectors or the residents in the surrounding area.
Yeah,
So, you know, as I said in my original remarks, planning law wholesale needs, you know, massive reform.
massive reform.